All right, let's not waste any time. You saw the title of the video. I am here to give you a list of my top 100 favorite films of all time. And I have been racking my brain over creating this list for the past couple of hours. I used Letterboxd to help me. So if you guys want to follow me on Letterboxd, go ahead and do that. And I will have my definitive list there that I can update anytime that I want. Now, the thing about this list is that these are my top 100 personal favorite films. So this is not a ranking of what movies I think are the greatest of all time or the best made movies, or maybe that some of the higher critically acclaimed movies might not actually be on this list and some other weirder ones with giant monsters fighting each other will be. That's because this is a list of my personal favorites. So there's no wrong answers here. There's no reason anybody should be like, where is blank movie? It's like, well, I might love it, but it just didn't enter my top 100. I've already logged over 1,000 films on Letterboxd just trying to remember all the movies I've seen. So, 100 is only like 10% of like everything that I've seen and probably liked over my lifetime. So this was an extremely difficult list to make, and I'm sure as time goes by, things will move up or down. Like, I would say probably my top 25 is pretty damn solid. It would be pretty difficult to move any higher or lower in the top 25. Everything else, if you ask me on a different day, it might move up a spot, down a spot. So don't look too deeply at the specific number. We're just going to be talking about my top 100 films, although I did try to rank them in order. So using Letterboxd to do it, which was very helpful. Basically, I wrote down every single movie, and I would move the movie up or down depending on what movie was above it. Like, would I rather watch this movie or this movie? And like I said, these are just my personal favorites, and they're going to range from everything. There's going to be horror movies, popular movies, maybe more obscure movies, comedies, children's films. It's just going to be filled with variety of movies that I've loved throughout my entire life that I still love. Anyways, getting down to the very bottom here at number 100, I really felt like I had to add this movie. This is a film called Pieces. This is a slasher horror movie from the 80s that is so absurd and ridiculous. There's literally a scene where the killer gets into an elevator with one of the victims and he's hiding a chainsaw behind his back. I just love it. Also, I made my girlfriend watch this on our first date, and she's still with me. So, it's an important movie. That's kind of the litmus test for girlfriends. Like, can they watch a cheesy, ridiculous slasher movie from the 80s and still want to hang out with me? So that's the test right there. At number 99, Toxic Avenger. I love Troma Studios, Lloyd Kaufman. I actually met him at a Comic-Con, and he signed my Toxic Avenger Blu-ray. He signed it to Raunchy Ryan, so I appreciate that. Toxic Avenger is, of course, over the top, ridiculous. Tons of gore, tons of kills. A man falls into a vat of nuclear waste, becomes the Toxic Avenger, and starts cleaning up the town by killing all of the bad people. It's a great example of low-budget special effects and what you can do with pretty much nothing, and it's what put Troma Studios on the map. Number 98 is called War of the Gargantuas. This is a kaiju film from Toho Studios that technically takes place in the Godzilla universe of the Showa era, but it's its own thing. And it is about two giant monsters, two gargantuas that are brothers, but one eats human beings, the other one likes human beings, and when they find that out, they get into a giant fight. Wonderful special effects, wonderful kaiju movie. This is a movie that I don't know why they have not released this on Blu-ray or 4K yet. I don't know what's going on with the rights to that movie. It's part of the Criterion channel, so I would love to see a Criterion Collection release of it, but there has not been a release past DVD, and unfortunately I don't own it, but I would love to own it. Other short thing to say about this list, don't bother with the star ratings too much. I pretty much rate every movie based upon just the film itself, how well it works on its own. The star ratings are not in comparison to other films. So you see like some have 4.5, some have 5. That's not saying that the 5 stars are necessarily better. I rate the movies just on itself. Like, how well does that individual movie work for itself, if that makes any sense. Anyways, moving up even further, 97, we got The Neverending Story. This is a movie I've loved since childhood. I love 80s puppet fantasy movies, this and Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, all of those. But Neverending Story has always been my favorite. And I think a huge reason for that is just, I don't know, just how the movie makes me feel. That ending speech with the wolf, and he's talking about the nothing and how people get older and give up on their dreams and stuff like that. It hit me very hard when I was a kid. And of course, obviously the Artax scene, And I love the giant turtle. Like, we don't even care whether or not we care. Like, I feel that energy. Next at number 96 is 500 Days of Summer. This is a romantic comedy, actually, about a guy dating a woman named Summer, and it takes place out of order. You see different stages of his relationship, of them getting together, and then, of course, the relationship falling apart. Overall, I think it has a pretty good message of not putting a lot of your idealistic fantasies onto somebody, and how you should focus on building yourself up instead, and that helps you attract better people. So yeah, that's going to be on there. Number 95 is Black Snake Moan. I think this is a criminally underrated movie that deals a lot with different types of mental illness. Christina Ricci, it helps that Christina Ricci, my number one celebrity crush, is in the movie, and what she's dealing with is nymphomania. But I think the movie also has a lot to say about grief. I think it also has a lot to say about anxiety. I think it has a lot to say about healing. Sam Jackson is in there. It's kind of a comedy, kind of a drama, but there's a really, really great emotional scene at the end of the movie that kind of seals the deal for me. And I always thought this was like a super underrated movie that nobody talks about. Number 94 is, of course, the anime film Akira. This is just a fantastic testament to what the medium of anime is capable of. I wish anime still looked like this. I understand the painstaking efforts it took to make it, but I still think, the animation in this movie is out of this world. I think it still holds up to this day. Wonderful sci-fi epic. Number 93 is another Troma film. This is called Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. This movie's not for the faint of heart. All right. This movie is wild. It's offensive. It's filled to the brim with gore and vomit and people reaching up into somebody's butthole and pulling something out of his mouth. But it's also a movie about, it's also a musical, by the way. And it's about a fast food restaurant that is built on top of an ancient Indian burial ground, and everybody that eats the fast food turns into zombie chickens. It's great. Next, 92, polar opposite, Muppet Treasure Island. This has always been my favorite Muppet movie. There's a lot of great Muppet films, Muppet Christmas Carol, the original Muppet movie, but Muppet Treasure Island has always been my ultimate favorite. I've watched this movie so many times when I was a kid, and it's very close to my heart. I also think it's just incredibly funny. Like, Blind Pew, Billy Bonds, where are you? Like, I don't know. And then there's a scene where Billy dies, and Rizzo's like, he died? I thought this was supposed to be a kid's movie. Anyways, Muppet Treasure Island, I love it. Oh, there's also, oh my God, when Gonzo gets the starfish and he's like mimicking like a ninja, and he's like, oh, Mikasa Sukasa. Number 91, another comedy, Black Dynamite. I think this is one of the funniest movies ever made. It's a spoof movie based upon a lot of the 70s blaxploitation genre with Michael J. White in the lead role. Dude, this is a movie that will make me laugh as many times as I see it. So the thing with me with comedies, the reason why there's not going to be a lot of comedy on this list is because comedies don't hold up for me as much as other genres. Usually they're kind of like a one-time thing, and once you know all the jokes, they just don't land the same way watching it again. Not the case with Black Dynamite. Every single time I watch this movie, I laugh my ass off. Who's interrupting my kung fu? Like, there's just so many funny things. Like, Black Dynamite, I sell drugs to the community. It's just fantastic. Now, the next one is also what I consider to be my type of comedy, which is Leprechaun 4 in Space. And look, there's a part of me that wants to rank this higher. The Leprechaun retrospective video will drop just a few days after I upload this video. And I'm going to just tell you all the reasons why I love Leprechaun 4 in Space. I don't need to do it now. But yeah, and I'm not even joking. They're legitimately in my top 100. I think this movie is fucking hysterical. Number 89 is going to be Ridley Scott's Legend. So this kind of falls into that 80s fantasy film genre that I miss so much, but Legend is far darker than Neverending Story. You got Tim Curry in there as like the devil-like character. You got early Tom Cruise, a bunch of unicorns that are very, very important. I just love the vibe, the atmosphere of this movie. I think another reason I love it is because it's, you know, before CGI took over, so a lot of the special effects are practical and they look really cool. And I miss that 80s fantasy style movie so much. Next one, 88, is Back to the Future. I don't think I really need to go into detail about that. One of the best movies ever made. Number 87 is Return of the Jedi. So I do have the entire original Star Wars trilogy on this list. They're just in different spots. I love Return of the Jedi. I just happen to like the other two more. Number 86, I have Ninja Scroll, which is another anime film. And this is a film that was a defining moment in my life. At the time that I watched this, I really didn't know anime outside of like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon. And, you know, I've told this story millions of times. And I think what's funny is that a lot of people have the same type of experience I've had with this movie, where we watched it way too young. I was like 12 years old when I watched this movie. And in the first 10 minutes, you have this giant rock monster demon that kills a bunch of people, rips a dude's arm off, starts drinking his blood out of his dripping arm, and then starts doing God knows what to the... Anyways, the point is, Ninja Scroll scarred me. It damaged my brain, but I think it also made me a better person along the way. Next one is 85 is going to be Watchmen. So I know Zack Snyder is a very controversial director, but I think Watchmen is a fantastic adaptation. People will argue back and forth. Some people hate this version. I am a fan of the comic. I've read the comic. I own the comic. And, you know, I don't think the Watchmen movie is perfect, but I think it's pretty damn good. I know they changed the ending a little bit, but the idea is still the same. I love the special effects. Going from practical to talking about CGI, I think the CGI in this movie is amazing. I think Dr. Manhattan looks amazing. I love the soundtrack. I think this movie was ahead of its time, honestly. I think it would probably be better suited coming out today after we've had so many superhero movies, but I love Watchmen. Next one is going to be 84 is going to be Brain Dead, or as I know it, Dead Alive. So this is just, I've talked about this movie too. This is just a fucking wacky, balls to the wall, crazy zombie movie. You have a kung fu fighting priest. I kick ass for the Lord. Fantastic. And this is Peter Jackson before he made Lord of the Rings. All right. And I still contest that this is Peter Jackson's best movie. Anyways. Next one up is 83 is going to be Star Wars, the original. So we talked about Return of the Jedi, got Star Wars on there too. 82 is going to be Mallrats. This is a really fun 90s comedy, Kevin Smith movie. Jay and Silent Bob are in it. Just a really fun movie that really feels like the 90s to me. Like this, when I think about the decade, you know, Mallrats is one of the first movies that comes to my mind. Number 81 is going to be the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie from 1990. Again, this is a film that I watched in my childhood over and over, and I still contest that this is a fantastic movie and one of the greatest superhero comic book movies ever made. I think it still holds up. I love the suits so much more than all the CGI turtles that we got in the future. I think these suits are awesome, and you can actually see people doing real stunts in them. The fight scenes are great. The emotion is here. I love all of the voice work for all of the turtles. I think that this one also really captures the 90s. I know it's 1990, so we're kind of bridging the decades, but again, it is a movie that makes me think of the 90s. And, watching this movie as a kid, it just was super impactful to me. And even as an adult, I still love watching this movie. Next one, number 80 is going to be Train to Busan. This is a zombie film, a South Korean zombie film that just blew me away the first time that I saw it. It is the fast running zombies, but I think that as far as like the fast zombie genre, I think Train to Busan has done it the absolute best and it has yet to be topped. Um, Number 79 is going to be Bride of Chucky. This is a film that, for whatever reason, I just never get bored of watching. It's the Chucky movie that I've seen the most, and it's not even my favorite Chucky movie, but for some reason, I just love it. I think Ronnie Yu is a great director. I wish he would have made more horror movies. Really good stuff. Number 78 is going to be the George Romero Dawn of the Dead. What can you say that hasn't been said about this movie? I made an entire retrospective about the Dead series last year, but fantastic characters, fantastic practical effects, a defining film in the zombie genre. This is basically the zombie movie that every other zombie movie has copied since it came out. You know, Dawn of the Dead set the template, you know, of what zombie movies could be. Number 77, I have Gremlins. This has always been a super fun one for me, again, since childhood. There's going to be a lot of those on this list. It's just the way that it is. You know, nostalgia plays a heavy factor in your favorite movies, and that's just going to be what it is. Like I said, it's not a list based upon what I think is objectively the greatest films ever. These are just my personal favorites. Always absolutely love Gremlins. Now, the next one, I'll do the next two, is Dune Part 1 and Part 2. I know that there's a bit of recency bias here, but I think these films are just incredible. Not just the story of Dune in and of itself. This inspired me to read the novels, which are fantastic. And although there are some things in the book that I wish would have been in the movie, like Alia and things like that, I still think the movies are an incredible experience. I love the way they look. I love the way they feel. I love the Hans Zimmer score. These movies are, I think, pretty much as good as they possibly could have been. Next one up, number 74, is The Descent. Now, some may remember I did like a top horror movie list a couple of years ago, and The Descent was pretty high. I still love this movie. Obviously, it's in my top 100 favorite films of all time. But I did do some reassessing, and I don't think I loved it quite as high as I ranked it on that original list. Like I said, these things are always kind of fluctuating, and depending on when you ask me, you know, things might move up or down a little bit. But I still love this film. I think it's terrifying. I think it's super scary before the monsters show up, with characters just in the corridors of the caves. Like, cave diving is something I'll never understand. I don't know why anybody would want to go into a dark, murky cave where there's only like this much space for you to like shimmy your body through. Like, what are you accomplishing? What do you get? I mean, maybe if there was like $10 million in there, but even then I probably wouldn't do it. It's just like, why are you doing this? And the next one, also recency bias, but I actually literally just watched Nosferatu again last night, and every time I watch this movie, I like it more. And so I'm putting it on the list for that reason, and I really do think it's up this high at number 73. I love the way that this movie looks. I love the cinematography. I love the atmosphere, but I also love how they portrayed Count Orlok, or, you know, Dracula. This is how I've always wanted to see him be portrayed, where he is just this shadow of darkness that infects everything around him, brings the plague with him, makes people go insane, makes people want to give in to their darkest desires. Like, he is just this entity of evil. And it's how I always imagine, you know, Dracula in my mind. Is just, it's more than just, I'm a vampire, I'm going to suck your blood. It's like everything that comes with him is just pure, visceral chaos and darkness. Like, he is a plague in and of himself. And this was the first movie that I think really, really captured it the way that I always imagined it. And so that's why it's got to be on here. Next at number 72 is Dr. Sleep. So this is a Mike Flanagan movie that is based on the Stephen King novel about the kid from The Shining, Danny Torrance, as an adult. Now, some may consider this to be a sequel to The Shining, which it kind of is, but I really do view it as its own thing. It's definitely its own story. It does relate back to The Shining. I wouldn't say you're wrong if you said it was a sequel to The Shining, but for me, I really do look at this movie just as its own entity. Ewan McGregor's always been one of my favorite actors, and I think he gives a fantastic performance here. and the entire, you know, band of gypsies and how they like absorb people, and like that whole sequence with the kid that they kill is just terrifying. And I also love sort of like the power system of this movie, if you think about it, with the Shining and how, you know, characters are able to communicate back and forth. And it just has so much going for it. And I think the thing too is that when I first saw this movie, I wasn't expecting much out of it, and it blew me away. And it's also one of those films that every time I rewatch it, it continues to hold up. I still love it just as much as I did the first time I watched it. Next one, number 71, is going to be Big Trouble in Little China. Again, this is my kind of humor. This is my kind of comedy. A John Carpenter movie that has crazy, you know, mystical martial arts and kung fu and wizards, but in the middle of it all is Kurt Russell just being the most absolutely useless person ever as the hero. And that's the joke that I think some people still don't really get, is that, you know, he looks like the standard action hero, but he's like totally incompetent and shouldn't even be in this situation. But that's what makes it even funnier. I think this movie is hilarious. And again, this is like my type of comedy. At number 70 is Freddy versus Jason. I love this film. So I got to stop saying that. Obviously, I love all these movies. They're my top 100. Like, shut up, Ryan. Anyways, Freddy versus Jason. This is a film that I was heavily anticipating when it came out. I was right in that, you know, perfect age group. I was like, you know, 13, 14, 15 years old, getting into horror movies, getting into slasher movies. And Freddy vs. Jason was like my Avengers. Like, you're putting these two characters in a movie together, and I'm going to see them fight each other. And the thing about it is it delivers on the premise. All right. It's not just like Freddy and Jason fight in the last 5 minutes and that's it. It's like, no, this movie, the whole movie is Freddy versus Jason. And I think that Robert Englund, this was the last time that he played Freddy, and he's so good in this movie. I think, you know, other than like the original Elm Street, which was a bit different interpretation of Freddy, like, I think he was having the time of his life, or at least it feels like he is. Like, he's so immersed in this role. Freddy is such a dickhead in this movie. Makes him the perfect villain. I love it. Number 69 is The Protector. This is probably my favorite martial arts film. It's Tony Jaa. You know the story of John Wick, right? Like they you know, kill his dog. He goes on a vengeance mission. Well, The Protector came out years before, and The Protector is they steal this man's elephant, and he goes on a vengeance quest to get his elephant back, and he's going to kick a lot of ass and break a lot of bones to find his elephant. But I also think that the choreography of the fight sequences in this movie are just astounding. It has one of my favorite scenes in any action movie ever, where it's a one take where Tony Jaa enters this building, and there's like a spiral staircase that goes all the way up to the top, and it's just floor above floor, and he fights his way from the bottom all the way to the top, and the camera just follows him the entire way. He's like kicking people off of the staircase. He's going, there's like a casino vibe going on. He's like throwing people into machines. Tables are breaking. All of these things are happening, and it's all in just this really long oneer. And that's still not even the best fight scene in the movie. There's a scene where he fights people with various martial arts style. There's like a wushu guy, and then what's the name of the I forgot the like Brazilian sort of breakdance style fighting. There's that, and then there's also just these jacked, like, giant power lifter motherfuckers, like 4 of them that he has to fight at the same time. This movie is crazy. He fights a biker gang, all in the quest to get his elephant back. It's so good. Number 68 is going to be Hostel. I think Hostel is actually pretty underrated. I think it gets a bad rap because of the time period that it came out and people considering it to be just torture porn. There is torture in the movie, but I think the film is deeper than that. I think there's a lot of good tension and suspense that people don't talk about in this movie. They kind of just focus on the torture stuff, but there's this whole scene where he's trying to escape, and he hides in the pile of body parts, and then he puts on the costume, and he meets that one guy where you find out what's actually happening, that people are paying to kill people, and he has to keep a straight face. I think this movie gets a bad rap sometime for just being like one thing, but I think it's a bit more complex than that, personally. Number 67 is going to be Cemetery Man. I really don't know how to describe this movie. This is one of those films that you just kind of have to watch. It's based on a comic book that I've never read, but it's about a guy that works in the cemetery. And every night, the recently deceased come back as zombies, and he has to kill them, you know? But that's not even the main story. The main story is him falling in love with this girl that gets turned on by everything that's happening, and then they start banging on her ex-husband's grave. Then he also encounters the Grim Reaper that tells him to shoot the living. It's a bizarre movie, but I just have so much fun watching it. I love how crazy this movie is. Like, this is... I wish I could see stuff like this in mainstream. Like, I think this is an Italian film, but this is kind of the type of movie I wish we could see more of, if that makes any sense to anybody. Number 66 is Spider-Man 2. Pretty self-explanatory. One of the greatest superhero movies ever made. The train fight sequence has yet to be topped. Number 65, another greatest superhero movie ever made with Logan. And number 64 is Mad Max 2, or The Road Warrior. Just a phenomenal display of real cars and real stunts, and just the badassery of that 80s action movie vibe and flavor. I also think it has a pretty good story. It has so many memorable moments, like Lord Humongous, hand over the gasoline. You know, it's just... and that's a guy that I aspire to be like. You know, like if the apocalypse really happened... I just want to get super jacked and wear a hockey mask and just tell people to give me their gasoline. Number 63 is The Departed. This movie is amazing. This is the film that made me realize what a badass Leonardo DiCaprio could actually be. It's a great story about the two sides of the coin between the crime world and the world of police. You got Jack Nicholson delivering a great performance, Matt Damon, Mark Wahlberg, just a fantastic film. Number 62 is The Empire Strikes Back. So that is my personal favorite Star Wars movie of the original trilogy. I just think it has the best stuff overall. I love the training sequences with Yoda. I think it has my favorite lightsaber duel at the end with Vader. And I just love the look, the vibe, the feel to this movie. The Battle of Hoth, all that stuff is great. Number 61 is The Terminator. Just a sci-fi action epic with a lot of horror in it too. Some people say that The Terminator is their favorite of the series, and I would completely understand that, because this movie has a specific vibe to it that is never really replicated once again in the Terminator series. So if you said The Terminator was your favorite, I get it. I definitely get it. Number 60 is going to be actually, I think the next two. Yeah. So these are the two that I flip-flop all the time. And I just ranked all of the the live action Batman movies in a previous video. But it depends on my mood. Sometimes I like The Dark Knight better. Sometimes I like Batman Begins better. But I consider them so similar. They're so close in my brain that I don't really break them up. So they're back to back. So whichever you want to put above the other, they flip flop all the time for me. Number 58 is The Predator. Dude, just pure 80s badassery. Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the coolest movie monsters ever. Dylan, you son of a bitch. Love it. Number 57 is Inception. This film is one that when it came out, I thought about it all the time. I tried to lucid dream. I did like every single technique that I could find on the internet about how to lucid dream, because I wanted to just like take control of my dream like they do in the film. Never really worked that well for me, but just a movie that I absolutely love. And that Hans Zimmer score, just peak. 56 is Taxi Driver. I think this is probably one of the greatest movies ever made. Again, if we were doing a list that's not personal favorites and I was doing a top, best films, I'm trying to be as objective as possible. At that point, Taxi Driver would be in the top 10 discussion. Just an incredible film. And the thing that I always point out about this one is that I think this film has some of the most realistic violence that I've ever seen in a movie. There's something about the way the violence is done in Taxi Driver. I don't know how to describe it. I literally don't have the words for it, but it just feels so real. Number 55 is The Faculty, an extremely deep nostalgic cut for me. I think they actually just released a 4K of this, so I want to pick that up. The Faculty is just your typical 90s horror sci-fi movie, but it's so good. Josh Hartnett, Elijah Wood, Jordana Brewster in this movie. My dear God. It's basically Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's aliens are taking over staff members starting at this high school, planning to expand into world domination, and a bunch of kids have to team up to stop it. And what I love about it too is that it's all the different cliques of kids. Like you have the nerdy kid, you have the jock, you have the druggie, you have the new girl. You have all of these different stereotypes that have to come together and face against this threat. Just, I love this movie. And number 54, another Robert Rodriguez movie, From Dusk Till Dawn. So this is a wild vampire movie. Two criminals played by George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino abduct a family so that they can steal their ride and get their way into Mexico to go to this bar called the Titty Twister, that they're meeting their friend at the next morning that will, take them away. It's for them to be safe. But what they don't know is that the entire bar is run by vampires who plan to kill them. Amazing. At number 53, Jaws. Do I need to say anything? It's Jaws. It's Jaws. Okay, moving on. Number 52, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. This one moved up on my list in my favorite horror movies a little bit after doing my retrospective and thinking about it a little more. This is one also that if you said this is the greatest horror film ever made, I really wouldn't be able to argue with you. I think this movie is just brutal and terrifying, and again, just grimy and disgusting, and it's everything that you want. And what I love about this film too is the soundtrack isn't really music. It's just like tones and scraping sounds and audio from slaughterhouses. How come nobody has ever scored a horror movie similar to this? It's such a creative idea. Anyways, Texas Chainsaw, number 50. And number 51 is Child's Play 2, which is my favorite Child's Play movie. I think this is Chucky at his best. I think this movie's a ton of fun. Super memorable ending scene at the toy factory. I think this is the definitive Child's Play. It's the one I remember the most from childhood, scaring the shit out of me. Love it. All right, and with that, we're halfway there. So now we're going to get into the top 50. And this was really, really difficult. But at the same time, I think the top 50 is a little bit more solid in my ranking than the bottom 50. Sometimes these movies can move up or down a slot or two, but I think the top 50 is pretty close, pretty damn close. Let's move up and see. What did I put here? Number 50, Django Unchained. Yes, tons of fun, which is a weird adjective to use about a movie that takes place during slavery, but Django, freed slave, becomes a bounty hunter and goes to rescue his wife. Just wonderful performances, wonderful action sequences. Just a lot of great stuff happening in this movie. Christoph Waltz is just phenomenal, as he always is in Tarantino movies. And one of the few times you get to see DiCaprio as a villain, which I think is really unique and cool. Next one is Blade Runner 2049, and I'm sure this one will get me in trouble with some people because it's wait, you have Blade Runner 2049 on your top 100 list, but you don't have Blade Runner. I love the original Blade Runner, and if I was making a top 125 or a top 150, I promise you it would be there. It's just so close not to be. But Blade Runner 2049, it just hit me on a different level. Maybe it was when I watched it for the first time, but there's a lot of emotion in this movie that just really, really got to me, with Gosling's performance and, the relationship between him and Joy. The visuals and the cinematography of this movie just put me into a trance in a good way. And I still think this is probably going to be my favorite Denis Villeneuve movie forever. You know what I mean? If Dune didn't top it, I don't think anything really will. Blade Runner 2049 just does it for me. 48, There Will Be Blood. I drink your milkshake. I drink it up. Imagine I have a straw and it stretches across the land into your milkshake. Literally, I think the greatest acting performance of all time is Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood. The only other performance I would say would be Bryan Cranston as Walter White, but in that case, he has, 5 seasons of television to develop a character. There Will Be Blood is it's 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes. Daniel Plainview is somebody I will never forget in the worst ways possible. Number 47 is The Mummy, and this is actually the 1999 remake with Brendan Fraser. This movie is so much fun. I rewatched it not too long ago, and I still think it holds up. I think it's a great action movie. I think it works as a decent horror movie. The thing that's so great about this movie is that it's just fun. It's just a fun action adventure horror movie with great characters and good humor and good fight scenes. Everything about it is good. Everything about it works. And it's one of those rare examples of a remake that I think outdoes the original by far. At my number 46 is King Kong, the original 1933 version. I love the other versions. I love the Peter Jackson version, but the original King Kong is just so damn amazing for its time. The special effects, the stop motion, the iconic status of the monster, just everything about King Kong lives up to the hype. And it's a movie that I think you can watch now, even in 2025, and still be that damn good. There's like a feeling to the fantasy of King Kong that just makes it feel, no pun intended, but so larger than life. Like, it stands the test of time for a reason. My next one, 45, is going to be Battle Royale. This is a Japanese movie based on a novel, and I think they turned it into a manga, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. But essentially, they take one class of students, throw them on an island, and give them all weapons, random weapons. They don't even know what they're going to get. They just get a backpack full of shit. And they all have to kill each other off until only one is left. And this movie is intense. It's dark. It's also got a lot of humor, which is weird, but it does. And just the premise of the movie, it's to like discourage, crime and like delinquency and stuff. So like it's basically like one random class is sacrificed, for this ritual. I know that the Hunger Games is criticized a lot for stealing a lot from Battle Royale, but this movie is just intense. It's just intense, and characters die that you don't expect to die. And you see like the panic in all of them, and the fact that they just get random weapons too. Like, okay, one person might get a gun and the other person gets a goddamn frying pan. Like, what the fuck? It's just the luck of the draw. 44 is a horror film called Possession, and this was one that completely escaped me for most of my life. I actually want to thank you guys for recommending this movie. I think specifically it was Velox in my chat, I'm pretty sure, recommended this one. I don't know why, but I had never heard of it before. I never watched it in my teenage years, and that's where I did my most amount of seeking out of different horror movies, especially from the 80s. It just never was on my radar. Never heard anybody talk about it. And then all of a sudden, it was brought up in my chat, and people were talking about it, and I watched it for the first time maybe 2-3 years ago. Holy shit, this movie's wild. This movie is fucking wild, memorable as hell. The entire, what do I want to call it? You know what scene I'm talking about if you've seen the movie. But this movie blew me away. And I just could not believe that I'd never seen it before. Amazing horror film. My number 43 is Dumb and Dumber. Not a lot of comedies on this list, but Dumb and Dumber is one of those films from childhood that I thought was fucking hilarious when I was 8 years old. I thought it was fucking hilarious when I was 18 years old. And I think it's fucking hilarious when I'm 35. So number 42, I almost put all three Austin Powers on here, but I figured for the sake of the list, we'll just put the first one. These movies always make me laugh. I don't know if it's because I first watched them when I was a kid and I still love them now, but there's something about Mike Myers as that character that I adore. I just think it's so goddamn funny. They're great spoof movies. I miss movies like this. I miss comedies like this. I miss Mike Myers in general. But Austin Powers has always done it for me. It's always been a hysterical movie trilogy. Me and my best friend, like at least once a year, and we don't even plan it out. It just happens. At least once a year, we end up hanging out and we watch all three Austin Powers movies in a row. And it's always a good time. Number 41, still in the comedy section here, we have Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny. So this movie I do think is absolutely hysterical, but it means a lot to me for a weird reason. So I first watched this movie the night right before I graduated high school. and I rented it kind of on a whim. Like, I knew Tenacious D because of their one album and the tribute song and all of that, but I'd never really watched the Tenacious D comedy skits or anything like that. And I rented this movie the night before I graduated high school, and I watched it, and I loved it so much. I loved the music, and I loved battling Satan in a rock battle at the end, and everything that happens in it. And I always just associate this movie with that, like, upcoming sense of freedom that I don't think I've ever felt since graduating high school. Like, there's something about when you graduate high school that just this gigantic burden just lifts off of you. And for, like, you know, the next 3 months before either you go back to you go to college or before you get a job like I did, there's just like this momentary little gap of freedom that I don't think I'll ever feel again in my life. And for some reason, when I watch the Tenacious D movie, it takes me back to that moment. And for just 90 minutes, I just kind of remember it. Number 40 is Beetlejuice. I know now they're all comedies. I didn't plan this, by the way. I really did try to rank this based upon my actual favorites, but whatever. We got a good string of comedies here. So Beetlejuice, again, is my kind of comedy where it's got a little bit of a darker edge, where it's about ghosts and the supernatural and weird sandworms and Michael Keaton just being amazing as he tends to be. Next one up, 39, is Mad Max Fury Road, a movie that just fucking floored me when I saw it in theaters. At the time when this came out, I think in 2015, and saw it in theaters, I would have probably put it in my top 10. Action, the chase sequences are just incredible. I live, I die, I live again. And the music, the Doof Warrior, come on. And also the fact that George Miller was like, what, 79, 80 years old when he made this movie. I hope if I ever make movies, that I make movies that are this fucking metal when I'm 80, 90 years old, man. Crazy. Yeah, what is next? Clerks, number 38, a wonderful movie, Kevin Smith's first film. This also, I guess, would technically be a comedy, although I look at it a little bit more like a drama, a slice of life, because one of the reasons I love this film so much is because I spent a large majority of my life working retail, and I just resonate with a lot of this. Now, the characters in this movie work in a convenience store. I worked in more of like a pharmacy, but I think that dealing with customers, dealing with the randomness of events that happen, dealing with, you know, getting called in on your day off, dealing with all of the things that happen in this movie, I really, really resonate with. Like, it connects with me on a personal level simply because of all the years I spent working retail. Number 37. So actually, I think I put, yeah, these next to each other because, again, I consider these like just in the same bracket. But the original Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, to me, some of the best to ever do it. These films are incredible. Do yourself a favor. If you've never watched the original Universal monster films, there's a few out there that I think are must-sees, and these are two of them. Particularly Bride of Frankenstein. It might be the first example ever of a sequel being better than the original, although it picks up right where the first one left off, so that's why I kind of consider them together. But yeah, amazing. Number 35, I have 2001, A Space Odyssey. Some people think this movie's super boring. I think you're super boring. This movie is fucking phenomenal. It has a lot to say about humanity and our advancements and evolution and whatever the next stage is going to be, starting with primitive man and then moving into the space age and the idea of AI and its priorities taking precedence over humanity, which is something that we're probably going to face in the future. AI is already becoming a massive issue, not to get into any of that, but 2001: Space Odyssey came out in 1968, and it's dealing with things that we are just now coming across in the real world. So what was once science fiction is starting to become reality. I also think the effects in this movie are incredible, especially for 1968, before CGI. You know, some of the best special effects ever. Just a visual spectacle. You know, Kubrick obviously has such an eye for detail when it comes to his photography, but 2001, it just looks amazing. You could literally put this movie on mute and just watch it in the background and still be captivated. My number 34 is American Psycho. Don't just look at it, eat it. I can't believe he prefers Paul Allen's card to mine. Just Christian Bale, man. Christian Bale, probably my favorite. Yeah, my favorite Christian Bale performance by far. But also just an interesting look into the insights of this character and how superficial everything is, and how fake and how copied, and how everybody just blends in together and nothing seems to matter at the end of the day. Not even murdering a bunch of people. If he murdered people, who knows? Hey, Paul! Also, the irony right now that my cat, Dracula, my cat who is named Dracula, just showed up. Come here, buddy. Come here. You want to get up here? Huh? Do you want to get up here? I named my cat Dracula. Not specifically because of this movie, but just I thought it would be a funny name for a cat. Anyways, the original Dracula is amazing. Early example of a great horror film. I know I said like Nosferatu is kind of what I've always wanted out of that movie, but you can't deny the impact of Bela Lugosi and the vibe and the style of this movie, the way the castle looks. Everything about it is amazing. And it really makes me feel like Halloween. Like it's a movie that I feel like if you watch at night in the fall and maybe light some candles, it just gives you a great vibe. At number 32 is The Shining. That was my cat knocking shit over. The Shining, yeah. Jack Nicholson just going ham. Shelley Duvall here doing an amazing job. The way that this film looks, the way that the hotel is shot. Nothing bad to say about The Shining. Number 31, may be controversial. I don't know, but I have said this many times on the channel. So if you're new here, this might be shocking. If you know me, if you know the channel, you know that this is not. I fucking love Prometheus. I love this goddamn movie. I have been singing its praises since it came out in 2012, back when I didn't know anybody else that liked this movie. Everybody hated it. Everybody was disappointed in it. This movie blew me away. I think it's fucking incredible. And I've been singing its praises ever since. Now, all of a sudden, in the last like 2 or 3 years, I've seen a lot more people talk about how they love Prometheus. And I'm glad to see it. But I was like, where were you guys the last decade? Because I feel like I've been standing on a hill by myself since 2012 talking about how amazing this movie is. Visuals, the characters, the origin of humanity, the engineers. I love everything about it. I don't care what the haters have to say. I don't care if people get mad that it's this high up in my top favorite films. I fucking love Prometheus. Deal with it. But not quite as much as I love Evil Dead 2 at number 30. Evil Dead, you will see, and you guys already know, it's my favorite horror film of all time. Evil Dead 2 is pretty close behind. I don't need to spend much time on this. I love the Evil Dead movies. Next up at number 29 is Night of the Living Dead. So although I would consider Dawn of the Dead to be the more iconic zombie film as far as how zombies are still currently portrayed today, Night of the Living Dead is a very special movie. It's special because George Romero's first film, what he could do with a very low budget, basically creating the zombie genre. And I love movies where characters are isolated. I like movies where characters are trapped in one location and they can't really escape. It's a very simple story, but it gets to the core detail of how people just can't seem to kind of come to any consensus. And we argue amongst ourselves so much that the outside threat, you know, becomes stronger and stronger and then eventually takes us down. And that's sort of like the core, you know, moral of the movie, I suppose. And I think its ending is so bleak, but in a completely profound way. Like, I love the ending of this movie. Like, I hate it, but I love it. I think it's perfect. Now, number 28 is Aliens. I love the whole Alien franchise. You know, I had Prometheus on here. Aliens is not far above it, as you can see. And sometimes I wonder, maybe one of these days will come where I put Prometheus higher. But for right now, I can't, because Aliens is so goddamn badass. Particularly the ending sequence with the Queen. Just one of the greatest movie monsters of all time. It looks so good. I'm, again, so glad that this came out before CGI, because I love the puppetry and the animatronic work on the Queen Alien. But also, this is the movie where Ripley really becomes a hero. You know, I always say, like, the first movie she becomes a survivor. The second movie is where she becomes a hero, and that's definitely present here. Number 27 is Scream. I'm a big Wes Craven fan, as you'll see moving up here. And Scream, I still think, lives up to the hype when it came out in 1996. I think, honestly, I could make an argument that I think Scream might have the greatest opening scene not just in a horror movie, but in any movie ever. You know, there might be like one or two that you could name above it that I would probably agree with. But in general, I really do think Scream has the best opening scene ever. But just above that, I had to put New Nightmare. And New Nightmare is really, really high on my list, and it would not be on most people's list, I know, but I think this movie is a goddamn masterpiece. I think it's underappreciated. It's a movie that I love more and more every single time that I watch it, and there would be no Scream without New Nightmare. So it deserves to be this high on my personal list. Then starting the top 25, I have The Devil's Rejects. A lot of people dismiss Rob Zombie, and he's made a lot of bad films, but he's also made The Devil's Rejects, which I think is a horror masterpiece. Taking the killers from House of a Thousand Corpses, also a sequel that is way better than the original, and making them the main characters as they're on the run from the law and trying to survive, while also having this bizarre family dynamic that is kind of endearing, but at the same time, they're mass murderers, so you hate them, but you also like them. And it's great because it leaves it up to the viewer, it leaves it up to the audience to decide how they feel at the end of this movie about what happens to these characters. Are you gonna, it's all fantasy at the end of the day, so it's like, are you gonna root for them, or do you want to see them get what's coming to them? And I think that's the fun part of this movie. Also very dark, very gritty, throwback 70s style. I think it's one of the greatest horror movies ever made, but I know I'm also in the minority on that one. Number 24 is Ed Wood. This is my favorite Tim Burton movie. Essentially, it's a biopic about this guy, Ed Wood, that is famous for making some of the worst movies ever made, like Plan 9 from Outer Space, but he did it with heart, with intention, with really, truly wanting to be a filmmaker, and it's a pretty inspiring movie about this guy that wants to just make films. Martin Landau does a amazing job as Bela Lugosi. It's a really great movie about a passionate guy that you could also tell was made by a passionate director at the time. At my number 23, I have Jurassic Park. So funny enough, Jurassic Park is my first memory of going to a movie theater. I think I was like 3 years old, 3 or 4. If it came out in 93. I don't know why my parents thought it was a good idea to take me, because that movie, I mean, for a 4-year-old, that movie gets pretty dark. But whatever reason, my mom took me to see Jurassic Park, and I've never forgotten how I felt in the theater that day. It might be one of my earliest memories ever. I specifically remember the scene, the T-Rex scene, where the boy, Tim, reaches out and closes the door, and as soon as the door slams, the T-Rex head just looks right in the window. I remember it scaring the shit out of me, but I also really loved it. And I think that it might have sparked my love for horror and monsters and all of that kind of stuff. At number 22, I'm putting John Carpenter's The Thing, another remake that is better than the original, and I think a true testament of 80s practical effects in horror. I always say, like, the top practical effects for me are always The Thing, Day of the Dead, and American Werewolf in London, but The Thing is probably my favorite when it comes to that. Again, characters trapped, isolated in a single location in the Arctic with one of the strangest and coolest movie alien monsters of all time, with The Thing that can assimilate itself to look like anybody else, and also take on all of your attributes as it absorbs you. Just a crazy sci-fi monster, and so difficult to fight back against. 100% a horror masterpiece. Up at number 21, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Bruh, what can you say? The story and the heart of this movie is great, with John Connor and the Terminator as sort of like a surrogate father. Sarah Connor is an absolute badass in this movie. The action sequences are a spectacle to behold, and it has perhaps one of, or at least like top 5 greatest antagonists ever in film, with the T-1000, the liquid metal Terminator that can just turn itself into anybody. It can create blades and stabbing weapons. And just like, how do you fight against this thing? You can blow it into pieces and it just regenerates once again. And the ending of this movie is so emotional. I feel it every time. Just a beautiful, beautiful movie. And entering into the top 20, number 20 is gonna be Alien. This is the one that started it all. The entire Alien franchise comes back to this. What a perfect movie where every step of the way, characters are realizing they're dealing with a creature that they have no idea what it is doing, how it replicates, how it grows, what it's capable of, and they're always one step behind. Something I think is incredible about this movie is the way that it builds, because the beginning of this movie is very slow paced, with long lingering shots and more atmospheric, like when they go out on LV-426 and explore the derelict ship. Like, it's so slow and suspenseful. I mean, it's in a good way, like slow in a good way, suspenseful. But then, like, the last 20 minutes of this movie, it just continuously ramps up. And by the time you get to the last 20 minutes, just alarms are going off, the lights are strobing, there's smoke, coming out of the ship. Ripley is running as fast as she can with a flamethrower. It's so intense. And you wonder, like, how did you get from point A to point B? Like, the slow atmospheric beginning to just the balls to the wall insanity of the ending. But it's the journey of getting from point A to point B that makes it so worth it. My number 19, you guys know I'm a horror movie guy, so a lot of the top is going to be like this. Number 19 is Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween, a perfect slasher film. With me and movies is, I'm a sucker for atmosphere, movies that just draw you into a particular feeling and a particular mood. And the way that Carpenter shoots these streets, even though they're in California and they're meant to be, in Illinois, the way that he shoots the streets with the falling leaves and the soundtrack, and just seeing Michael Myers staring at you somewhere in the distance, whether it's behind a bush or outside of the school window, just this creepy stalking force that at some point is going to strike, but you don't know when. It's a movie that I adore with all of my heart. And the next one, I feel the same way. Nightmare on Elm Street, a horror masterpiece. Freddy Krueger, definitely in that discussion of the best movie villains of all time. What a terrifying premise of somebody that was a child murderer to begin with, already terrifying enough. But then after he was burned to death, he comes back as some sort of dream demon, taking out his vengeance in people's dreams. I also think that Tina's death, where she's getting dragged across the ceiling, is probably my favorite horror movie kill of all time. I think it's fucking terrifying. And number 17, Hellraiser. Although I may hate the Hellraiser sequels, I think the original is a masterpiece of horror and is probably the closest to the type of horror film I would make. I don't know if what that says about me, but I love this film. Great soundtrack once again. I love the way that the Cenobites are utilized. They're not the main focus. If you've never seen Hellraiser, Pinhead isn't actually the villain of the movie. The villain is Frank. And I think Frank is also one of the greatest movie villains of all time. I'm going to keep repeating that because we're in my top 20 at this point. So this is kind of how I feel about these characters. If they could give me the reins to remake any horror movie, I'd choose Hellraiser. And I would basically keep the same story and same script. I would just change some things and update the special effects. But Hellraiser, it just does it for me. It's a horror movie that I love to watch and I'll go back to over and over and over again. All right, we're finally going to switch gears entirely to a movie called Stand By Me at number 16. As we get up higher here in like the top, 15, 16 movies, we're going to be dealing with movies that hit me a little bit more on a emotional level, something that means a lot to my heart, not just movies I think are great films, but that like mean something specific and personal to me. And Stand By Me is a movie about, a group of kids that go out on this adventure to find this dead body that they know is out there. And it's based on a Stephen King story. But it's one of the few movies that I think really captures the world you live in when you're a kid, because it's not the same world as when you're an adult. And it's not even the same world when you're a teenager. When you're a kid, characters in this movie are like maybe 12, 13, maybe 14 years old, early, adolescence. The world's very different. You understand things, but you don't at the same time. There's this level of freedom that you have that you don't realize that you have. And more importantly than that, there's the way that your friendships work. There's something about friendships at that age that are so meaningful and so impactful and so tight-knit that just are not the same as you get older. And you might still have like great friendships, but friendships evolve. It's not like this adventurous sort of anything can happen sort of world when you're that young. And I think that this movie really captures a specific point in life, a specific point in time where it's like you have something so wonderful and magical that you don't even realize that you have. And I don't think anybody even realizes it when they're at that. I think when you're that young, you're not even capable of realizing it until you get older and you look back. And, one of the final lines of this movie is, "You never have friends like the ones you had when you were 12." And it's like, it's so true. At number 15 is The Revenant, a movie every time I watch it, I like it more. It's brutal, it's dark, it's about survival, that indomitable will of the human spirit to continue to go on. And Tom Hardy is viciously awful in this movie. He's such a dick. I mean, not awful performance. I mean, his character is such an asshole. And that you want to see DiCaprio's character get vengeance on him. Cinematography is amazing, good story, great performances, nothing more to be said there. The next one here, okay, number 14, I put Godzilla. And here's the thing that you have to understand. This is the only point in the list where I'm cheating. So use the number 14 spot to represent every Godzilla movie, basically. Because, first of all, I didn't want like 30 of the movies on my top 100 list to be Godzilla movies. But if I was being 100% honest, it would be. So Godzilla is probably the property that means the most to me out of any other franchise. Godzilla is something that's been with me my whole life. If you hadn't noticed, in the background of my videos, I have an entire Godzilla wall, and that's going to continue to expand. The Godzilla films are my bread and butter. They are the films that I watch the most. They are the films that I remember the longest. Falling in love with Godzilla movies when I was like 5 years old. I remember watching all of these films over and over. King Kong vs. Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla from the Showa era, Monster Zero, all of those films, the Heisei era. Then, of course, you got the Millennium films, and then you got the Monsterverse, and then you got Shin Godzilla and Minus One. And just like all of these Godzilla movies, I can watch all day, every day. The only one I wouldn't would probably be Godzilla's Revenge or... Godzilla Raids Again isn't that good, but like other than those two and the 90s American Godzilla, which isn't that bad, but like what I'm trying to say is that number 14 is a reserved spot for Godzilla as a franchise because I can't separate myself from how much I love Godzilla. It is something that I have always had a fascination with. It brings me back to my happy place, like very few things in life give me joy. And when I go through an existential life crisis, which is like maybe twice a week, I watch Godzilla movies. I go to bed watching Godzilla movies. It centers me. It just makes me feel like a kid again for a brief moment. I love the Godzilla franchise. So number 14, although 1954, I do think the original film is a masterpiece and deserves to be on the list. Just consider it a blanket spot for the entire Godzilla franchise. Now, the next ones, I'll show all three at once because they're all in the same series. And this was one, too, that I was going to use one spot, but I was like, no, because I put the different Star Wars movies, I put different yada yadas. The Before trilogy, essentially, Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. I did a video on this trilogy, I think last Valentine's Day last year. And it's a movie about a couple, but it's an interesting way to look at it because the entire movie is essentially just them having a conversation. It is not based upon some kind of plot or action or twists and turns. It is literally movies about characters talking. And each movie has a specific purpose. So Before Sunrise is the first one, and this is where the two characters meet each other for the first time, and they end up having they just hang out all night and have this great conversation between one another, and that's pretty much the entire movie. And then Before Sunset takes place 9 years later, and it's them meeting up again after not seeing each other for 9 years. And then Before Midnight is 9 years after that, and now they are together, and they have started a family together. What I think is also interesting about these movies is each one takes place in a different decade of life. So Before Sunrise, both characters are in their 20s. Sunset, both characters are in their 30s. And Midnight, both characters are in their 40s. And it's also kind of a look at how we view relationships within the different decades of your life. So it's just a very fascinating look at life and relationships and how things change over time and how people change over time. And these movies are very close to my heart. They get me emotional. I think they're great. And at last, we're entering into the top 10. My top 10 favorite movies. What could they be? Number 10 is Drive. When I talked about feeling an atmosphere, Drive gives me something that no other movie has ever really given me. I also saw this movie for the first time at a very pivotal point in my life, back right around the time it came out. Actually, this was one of those movies that was kind of a cold buy. I picked it up just because I heard people talking about it. I rarely ever buy a movie before watching it, but it was just one of those where I felt like it was the right decision, and holy shit, it was. This is also an example of a movie where you can take a very simple premise, a very simple story, but if you do it creatively enough and you do it uniquely enough, it becomes a masterpiece. And I don't think you need to have a super complex story. I don't think you need to have twists and turns. I don't think you need to have anything too shocking to make it a good movie. Drive is a great example of taking something super simple on paper and then transforming it into a masterpiece. And my number 9 is Magnolia. This is a 3-hour-long drama just about people, but god damn is it good. It's all of these interconnecting stories and interconnecting people during this strange event that happens, but the acting and the performances in this movie are heartbreaking, tragic. Tom Cruise, I think, gives the best performance of his entire career in this movie, along with John C. Reilly, Julianne Moore. All of these actors just give 110%, and it's emotional, it's engaging, it's thought-provoking. And for me, this is one of those films where the 3-hour runtime just goes like that. I get so engaged and involved in this movie, and it's always been one of my top favorites since I very first saw it. And my number 8 is Fight Club. So call me a film bro, call me whatever you want, I don't care. Fight Club is that good, and I'm tired of people saying that it's not, or saying that you like it for the wrong reasons. I get the message of Fight Club, okay? But there's no doubt in my mind that Fight Club is a masterpiece, and it'll make you think about your own life and your own station in life. It'll make you think about what's important to you, and it's also just so ingenious when you get to the end, and then its rewatchability is that much better every time you go into it, kind of knowing what you know. Number 7, Inglourious Basterds. I think this is Tarantino's best movie, and I've said this multiple times. This might also arguably have one of the best opening scenes ever, and one of the greatest characters too, with Hans Landa, played by Christoph Waltz. I think that's his best performance of all time. But the way that Tarantino is able to do tension in this movie and build up suspense is, I think, better than he's ever done it in any other film. I also love the creative choice of having language be such an important part of this film, and how well characters can speak German and French and go undercover. And it's something that would be disregarded in a lot of regular mainstream movies. They would just have every character speak English. I like the creative choice of, I guess, being more authentic and having them speak their individual languages. And I also love the ballsy choice of Tarantino changing history and just doing whatever he fucking wants at the end. Because at the end of the day, I'm not watching a movie to be a documentary. I'm not watching a movie to be an accurate depiction of history. I'm watching it to be a story. And a story is fantasy. It's fake. It's fiction. So change history. I don't care. At my number 6, Oldboy. The Korean version, the original, stay as far away possible as you can from the remake. In fact, I might have to add the remake on my most hated films list, but the original is just incredible. A man gets abducted and imprisoned for 13 years, and he has no idea why. And then all of a sudden, he's just released back into the world, and he goes on a vengeance mission to find the people that did this. But the story gets more dark and more twisted than you could possibly imagine. It has the iconic hallway fight sequence that has been replicated many times, but never done as good as the original. It's not an action movie. It's a drama for sure. And you could even maybe say it branches into horror a little bit, but just an incredible experience. I remember the first time I watched Oldboy, I just sat there afterwards just staring at the wall. I was like, what the fuck did I just watch? And that's a feeling I think everybody should have. Number 5, True Romance. This is a film written by Tarantino, but directed by Tony Scott. And it's just a movie that fills me with joy and always has. It is about two characters played by Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, and they get together and take a bunch of cocaine, not take it themselves, but steal a bunch of cocaine from the mob and try to sell it. And it's a very romantic movie about the mob coming after them, the police looking into them, and them just trying to make a bunch of money and then escape together to live their life together because they're in love. It's a romance movie. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's hilarious. Christian Slater, I think, gives an all-time best performance, and I don't know what this says about me as a person, but there's a lot I relate to in Clarence. Anyway, great movie. And the top 4, and this has been my top 4 since I created my letterbox, so I'll blow through these pretty quick. Seven Samurai. I legitimately think Seven Samurai is the best movie ever made. If I was doing an objective list, I think Seven Samurai is the best. I think it gives you everything that you could possibly want in a movie. It's an epic. It's like 3.5 hours long, but it's a great story. And it gives you action. It gives you drama. It gives you comedy. It gives you a love story. It gives you tragedy. It gives you memorable characters. It gives you memorable scenes. All of the action sequences at the end. This movie was made in the 50s, so it's real people and real horses and real rain and all of that stuff. Just an amazing movie overall. And I always say it's one of those films that I think after you watch it, you'll kind of understand how many other movies took from this movie, you know? It just has one of those templates that you've seen done over and over again, but Seven Samurai, you know, was the crown jewel of it. Number 3, Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead is my highest comedy and also my highest zombie movie. So make of that what you will. But this is a film that I can watch anytime, anywhere, any day. I've seen it probably more than I've watched any other movie. It is that rewatchable. When I was a teenager, I watched it like every single day. And it's still funny to me. It still gets to me. And I think what makes it work too is that although it is a comedy, the stakes are real. You know, like characters actually die. There's emotional moments. It's not just like nothing matters, right? Like it's a real zombie apocalypse. Just there's funny things that are happening. You know, it's a comedy, but it's also a legitimate horror, you know? And I think that's what makes it work. Number 2 is my favorite horror film of all time. And this is a movie that inspires me to make movies. The Evil Dead, what Sam Raimi was able to do with nothing. He just took a group of friends and a bucket of blood out into the middle of the woods and just tried to make the scariest thing possible. He created his own subgenre, essentially, his own, you know, specific kinetic energy with the camera, doing things that nobody else would think to do. I also love the aesthetic of this movie. I love the way that the fog looks. I love the way that the sky and the forest looks. I love the dirtiness, the griminess of this movie. You can feel that the actors are really like beating the shit out of each other. Like they're really in pain. There's scenes where Bruce Campbell is really bleeding on screen. I think the effects are amazing for what they are. I think it's charming. I think it's endearing. I think it's scary, legitimately. This is just a masterpiece of a film and also a movie that makes me want to make movies. And my number 1 favorite film of all time is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This movie is near and dear to my heart. I just did a updated review of this earlier this year. It was from an old video that got demonetized because of clips, so I re-edited it. So it's a recent video now. But essentially, Jim Carrey is the main character, but it's a drama about a guy that finds out that his girlfriend has undergone a procedure to erase her memory of him. And so he gets very upset about that, goes out to have the same procedure done. And about, I'd say 75 to 80% of this movie takes place in his mind as the memories are being erased. But the creative choice of the film is that it starts with the most recent memory and then goes backwards. And about halfway through the procedure, he wants it to stop. However, it can't stop because it's in his head. And so he's forced to watch memory after memory after memory be deleted of this girl that he loves. It's a movie about, and I think at its core, you know, why it resonates so much to me, besides just having like relationships fall apart in the past and stuff, I think it's core message is really about appreciating the present moment. I think the biggest mistake that most of us make in life is that we don't appreciate things until they're gone. And I think Eternal Sunshine is a movie that really showcases to me how important it is to value things as they're happening. So there's that aspect of it. There's the relationship aspect of it. And I also think it's just a very creative movie with its special effects, and a lot of things were done practically. A lot of things were done in camera. I think the side characters are also great. Kirsten Dunst is in here. Mark Ruffalo is in here. I think they all do an amazing job as well. And it's just a movie that it's my number one, but I don't watch it that often. I maybe watch it once a year, if that. But I think it's because it has that impact on me. So it's like Eternal Sunshine and Shaun of the Dead are like the polar opposites, where Shaun of the Dead is a movie that I love, that I can watch any day of the week. Eternal Sunshine is a movie that I love, but it requires that specific mood to kind of re-enter that into my soul. But it's still my number one. And because of the emotional resonance that it has with me. So yeah. So there you have it, guys. Those are my, as of right now, March 13th, 2025. Those are my top 100 favorite films, but I'm making this list on Letterboxd. So if you follow me there, you can look at the list anytime. And if I ever feel the urge to update it, to move a movie up or down, or to add a new movie in, I'll update it right on Letterboxd, so you guys can stay up to date with my top 100. So let me know what you guys think of my list down below. This is a video I've wanted to make for quite some time. It's just a really, really difficult task to try to rank all these movies, but as of this current moment, this is where I'm at. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. Give the video a thumbs up and a comment to help it out in the algorithm. Hopefully you guys are looking forward to the Leprechaun retrospective. Comes out on St. Patrick's Day. As always, guys, I appreciate your support. If you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I do have Patreon and channel memberships, and I'd really appreciate it if you did so. Even $1 a month goes a long way. A lot of my videos don't do too well, so it kind of helps me be able to create longer videos in the process of not uploading every day. But anyways, regardless, whatever kind of support you give, whether it's Patreon or just a comment and a like, I appreciate it. Thanks for watching as always, guys. I'll talk to you later.